So thank you so much for listening to our session entitled Asia Focus Accelerating Inclusive Water Governance to Advance Sustainable Development Goal. So before I move on to this session, I slightly would like to introduce about the technical information about this session. This session is supposed to be organized as 3 sections. In third section, we will use Mentimeter to hear your opinion. Then, next, I would like to ask all audience to ask any question and feedback freely using the chat box if possible. All speaker will respond to you appropriately through this webinar or even after the webinar. So now I would like to start this session. I am Yumiko Asayama, manager of Japan Water Forum, and I am also coordinator of the Asia Pacific Water Forum. Asia Pacific Water Forum is a regional coordinator of the Stockholm World Water Week 2021. So this session is organized as a milestone towards Asia Pacific Water Summit held in April 2022, Kumamoto City, Japan. The summit aimed to support decision-making process and encourage the leadership and commitment of heads of states and government of 49 countries in Asia and the Pacific urgently and decisively for resilience, inclusive and sustainability for the current and the next generation of the quality growth in Asia and the Pacific. Water crisis is often as a crisis of governance, so addressing effective water governance should be one of the highest priority in Asian Pacific. So key regional actors gathered in this session will share the innovative approach in examining and improving water governance to boost sustainable and inclusive development and kickstart commitment toward concrete collaboration action. This session is divided in 3 main parts. Now I would like to start the first part. First part is discuss about the position and status of water governance in Asia and the Pacific to examine regional water governance challenge. Each speaker has 5 minutes. So now I would like to invite Ms. Nisa Poprel, Chief Water Sector Group of Asian Development Bank. So Nisa, floor is for yours.
Thank you, Yumiko-san. Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. The recent COVID-19 pandemic has harshly reminding us still, because we are in the middle of it, that water security is not only crucial for fostering and sustaining inclusive development, it is also critical in dealing with shocks like this pandemic. And it is the role of development banks like ourselves to be at the forefront to remind our clients, our developing member countries, that creating assets and infrastructure alone is just not enough. Achieving water security, including meeting SDG 6 targets, is simply impossible, to say mildly, without tackling or ensuring inclusive governance. Ensuring good governance, the right policies, frameworks, and capacities is critical to enable and sustain good services. Financial resources will follow when one tackles these, and that's what we say as bankers. We also know that our member countries can tackle these when we have good data on where they're at, how they can benchmark their services, monitor and evaluate progress so they can set coherent governance policies, structures to improve efficiencies, and act when needed, and all in interaction with stakeholders in a transparent way. Next slide, please. It is precisely for these reasons that ADB, in partnership with many organizations, many of whom are included here in this session, ABWF, OECD, have been supporting our developing member countries in Asia and the Pacific to have a comprehensive assessment of water security. And that is done in the form of Asian Water Development Outlook, or ADO. Launched in 2007, with subsequent updates in 2013, 16, and our latest edition of EDO came out in December 2020. It assesses national water security of all of our member countries based on 5 key dimensions, as you can see here: rural household water security, urban water security, economic water security, environmental water security, and water-related disaster security. They have had synergies across the all of the EDOs, so that the comparability is there and data obtaining is consistent. Next slide, please. Water security in EDO is expressed in scores. It is calculated for each key dimension based on public data on indicators that describe the key dimensions' performance. The scores of all 5 key dimensions have then been aided to come up with multi-dimensional national water security score. As you can see in this table, the national water security development stages are indicated as nascent, engaged, capable, effective, and finally as a model. Next, please. Now, this slide shows you our member countries and gives you an overview of the results that we have found from EDO 2020. And unfortunately, it shows that none of them have achieved the model stage yet, not even the advanced economies. Next slide, please. But the good news is that we can observe some positive trends despite the challenges that people living in nascent and engaged stages of water security are facing. Several ADB member countries have improved from nascent and engaging stages, and the ratings have gone up to capable and effective ratings in recent years. Having said that, we have been seeing that COVID-19 pandemic is challenging many of our countries' efforts to become more water secure and resilient. We still have to assess the impacts of how this pandemic has created on the country's water security in the years to come. Next slide, please. Now, here are the key recommendations of EDO 2020. I'm not going to repeat them. You'll probably get access to the presentations if you need, and I can entertain questions later. But key aspects such as positioning water as a centerpiece of rural development is important, because this aspect is oftentimes forgotten when we talk about water security and position ourselves or our governance policies. For urban security, investing inclusively, not only in cities, but also in slums and peripheral areas, and gender security in mind when we do that. Creating a healthy environment by stimulating a circular economy, embracing nature-based solutions are multiple aspects of getting to this healthy environment recommendation. Now, finally, and most importantly, in the current context, increasing resilience of systems, financing to build back better. This is a mantra, and it's quite topical that we all must remember as we position ourselves post-COVID-19 scenario and build our governance structures and models around this resilience block. So finally, please, next slide. I encourage you to visit the website, EDO website, to learn more, because it's simply not possible to really walk you through the EDO in such a short time. I also would like to emphasize that EDO 2020 has a specific chapter on water governance and financing, both of which are very critical, and you'll hear other speakers talk about it. So please do visit the EDO website, and I look forward to interacting with you in future, and thank you again. Thank you. I stop here.
Thank you, Nisa, for your very concise summary of the EDO 2020. Impressive. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Maria Salvetti from OECD. Maria, floor is for yours.
Thank you very much, Yumiko. As was just mentioned, EDO 2020 has a whole chapter dedicated to water governance. And I will take you through the findings and recommendations that we do share in this chapter. Next slide, please. But first of all, let me tell you that we have collected governance data for 48 countries of the region through a questionnaire built around the 12 OECD principles on water governance and comprising 46 questions. And we've seen, we've tried to assess how these principles, the OECD water governance principles, were implemented, to which degree they were implemented in the various countries and sub-region in Asia and Pacific. Next slide, please. So among the key findings, well, first of all, we can see that most countries have an overarching water policy framework, either in the form of an environmental law or a specific water law. And also we've seen that water policy coordination mechanisms are in place in most countries, with 81% of countries that have set up river basin organizations at national level in national basins or transboundary basins. Next slide, please. A majority of countries in Asia Pacific have adopted dedicated water policies, which tend to clearly indicate goals to reach and duties of the involved water institutions. However, in a large majority of countries, these dedicated policies do not clearly indicate the resources needed to achieve the goals, thus generating unfunded mandates and hampering their implementation. In many countries, the lack of financial resources is compounded by a lack of human resources and capacity, which prevents the timely and efficient implementation of investment projects and dedicated water policies. Next slide, please. There is also a widespread absence of water-related data and information across a vast majority of countries. This lack of data, which affects water and sanitation services, water resource management, as well as water-related disaster information systems, is preventing any water policy from evaluation and monitoring. So this is also a key aspect. Next slide, please. There is also a limited adoption of water policy instruments to manage trade-offs, as for instance, 79% of the Asia Pacific countries have no policy instrument to allocate or monitor groundwater extractions, which definitely represents a threat to water security. In addition to policy instruments, economic instruments can also be used to manage water risk. And what we see is that only 1/3 of the countries in Asia Pacific have implemented abstraction and pollution charges. Next slide, please. There is also a limited uptake of integrity practices and tools, but I will let the next speaker maybe develop a little bit on that topic. And we've seen also through the water governance survey that there is a limited stakeholder engagement, with 1/3 of countries only having implemented a formal or informal engagement mechanism. Next slide, please. So among the governance, the key governance recommendation that we can highlight here in that presentation, I would like to focus obviously on the strengthening of the implementation and monitoring.
You have 1 minute to wrap up, sorry.
Thank you very much. Of the water-related policies, also the adoption of water policy instruments to manage trade-offs, especially targeted to groundwater management, for instance, adopting water economic instruments to manage water resources, address capacity and data gaps, and develop further stakeholder engagement, as well as mainstreaming integrity practices. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria, for your very, very informative analysis about the water governance situation in Asia and the Pacific. And the recommendation is also useful for enhance our water security in Asia and the Pacific. In Maria's presentation, limited integrity, limited uptake of the integrity practice and tool is one of the issues. Next, Ms. Barbara Schneider will talk about how to improve water integrity. So now I would like to invite Barbara. Barbara, floor is for yours.
Thank you very much, Yumiko-san, and good day to everybody who's listening. And thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this important discussion. Next slide, please. I'd just like to say thank you very much to the previous presenters who set the scene so well for what I'm going to talk about and for pointing out the challenges of low levels of integrity practices in Asia. What I'm going to do in my short time is to hone in on the issue of integrity in water and sanitation, the achievement of the SDGs and the Water Integrity Global Outlook 2021. Next slide, please. Firstly, let's just be clear about what we understand by integrity so that we're all talking the same language. Integrity is the use of vested powers and resources ethically and honestly for the delivery of sustainable and equitable water and sanitation services. Next slide, please. And essentially, we look at integrity as being created out of 4 pillars. Transparency, which is about making relevant information, etc., available to everybody. Accountability, which is about responsive institutions, individuals who understand and fulfill their responsibility, and sanctions where this is not happening. Participation, which is very clear to everybody, and then actually anti-corruption measures. So those are the 4 pillars that make up integrity, and we shorten that as TAPA. Next slide, please. Secondly, I think that we need to understand what the costs of corruption and integrity failures are and how high they are. In the Water Integrity Global Outlook 2021, you will see figures of between 5 and 25% of procurement costs, but potentially much higher in some countries going to corruption and integrity failures. But we need to understand that the actual costs are much, much higher because corruption results in poor infrastructure outcomes, ongoing maintenance costs and challenges, poor service delivery, waste of limited financial resources, and ongoing social and environmental costs over the years. I think it's also important to realize that if we fail to meet SDG 6, it impacts on our ability to achieve many of the other SDGs. If we don't meet SDG 6, we won't meet the SDGs for health, gender, poverty, hunger, education, production, industry, and so on. So integrity in water and sanitation not only allows us to achieve SDG 6, but is integral to actually achieving all of the SDGs. Next slide, please. I now want to turn quickly to 2 short case studies from the Water Integrity Global Outlook 2021, which is focused on urban water and sanitation and which we're launching later today. The WeGo 2021 is focused on the fact that corruption risks can be reduced and integrity can be improved, and it draws on good practice from around the globe around how to do this. It outlines what can be done at the city level, by national government, by regulators, by utilities, development partners, civil society, and the media. Next slide, please. The first case study that I just want to look at very briefly comes from Bolivia's capital city of La Paz, where the mayor, Juan del Granado, or otherwise known as Juan Without Fear, established a zero-tolerance approach to corruption across all sectors of the city administration, not just water and sanitation. And the initiative had 3 main parts: the prosecution of corrupt acts, supported by codes of conduct for public officials, the fostering of economic recovery, and very importantly, the rebuilding of trust between public institutions and residents through greater transparency and more participation. And one of the things that they did was to send out anti-corruption officials pretending to be normal users of a public service in order to check how well the service was actually being delivered and whether corruption was involved. The process, which you can read more about in the Water Integrity Global Outlook, helped to restore the city's financial credibility and to attract funding from international sources which had previously been cautious about lending to Bolivian institutions. Next slide.
You have 1 minute to wrap up, sorry.
The next in Bangladesh, the Khulna Water Supply and Sewage Authority initiated an integrity change process using WIN's Integrity Management Toolbox and InWash tool. The process led KWASA to operating with more transparency, accountability, and participation. Achievements included reductions in the delay between water connection requests and connection, digitalization of billing, improvements in billing and delivery and regularization of unmetered connections, and the introduction of an e-procurement system. And you can read there a quote from the managing director of KWASA about the fact that it was difficult to begin with, but they succeeded in putting in place the measures to take it forward. Next slide, please. So the WeGo 2021 gives practical support to the Asian Water Development Outlook call for mainstreaming integrity and transparency practices across water policies, water institutions, and water governance frameworks that are key for greater accountability and trust in decision-making and in effective implementation of water policies. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Barbara, for your very concise summary about the way to mainstream integrity. So next, I would like to invite Mr. Colin Heron, GWP. He will talk about the progress of IWRM in ASEAN Pacific based on the SDG 651 monitoring in 2020. So Colin, floor is for yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Yumiko-san, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, depending on where you are in the world. So yes, I'm going to talk about the SDG 6.5.1 monitoring for the Asia Pacific region, which is the degree of implementation of integrated water resources management. Next, please. So first, a little bit of background. The 2017 Asia Pacific Water Summit formalized the Yangon Declaration, which was the show of commitment from leaders in the region to achieve integrated water resources management, or IWRM, which is very much necessary because currently 1.1 billion people in Asia alone are in conditions of water stress. And that number is predicted to increase by 40% by 2050. So really there's a need for immediate action. Next, please. Unfortunately, this has also been formalized within the framework of the SDGs. And as the previous speaker mentioned, reaching the SDGs on water and sanitation will be key to the achievement of all of the SDGs. SDG 6.5 in particular on water management is the one that is very cross-cutting in nature. And that's the one that my presentation today is focusing on. Next, please. Sorry, previous slide, just briefly, to mention that IWRM is measured through the 4 components of enabling environment, institutions and participation, management instruments, and financing. Next, please. So where are we as a result of the monitoring effort? Of the 61 countries in the region, 58 reported last year in 2020, despite the pandemic, on the current status of IWRM. Of those 58 countries, GWP, with our partners at UNEP and UNEP DHI and CAPNet, facilitated multi-stakeholder processes in 16 countries, which brought together about 1,000 different stakeholders to monitor the status of IWRM from different perspectives. And in some cases, we can see that was the 2017 baseline was just reconvened due to the difficulties of the COVID-19 situation. Next, please. Now, where are we? Globally, the status of IWRM is at 54%, and in the region of Asia Pacific, it's 55%, so slightly above global average. And of the 4 dimensions that I mentioned, financing is the one that is lagging most behind. So that's where most effort is needed. Next, please. Within the region, and this is coherent with what we saw in the presentation on Aldo earlier, there's a great variation in where the countries in the region are, both in regional terms, but also at the country level. You can see that there are many countries that are well advanced towards achieving IWRM. No country in the region is fully there yet, but there are plenty of opportunities for exchanges between the countries in the region. Next, please. So based on this monitoring effort, we have identified some priority actions which require urgent attention and building upon the political commitment that already exists. Developing or accelerating water laws is a sine qua non condition for advancing. The harmonization of policies which are cross-sectoral and which have water as a key component, as well as the coordination structures that can make those policies effective. The establishment of stakeholder participation in water decision-making, which has been mentioned, also robust and transparent, accountable platforms for data capture and sharing between all stakeholders. The building and strengthening of partnerships, including with the private sector, which can unlock new financial opportunities and the revenue for IWRM from government streams as well. It's clear that there's a mixture of public and private funding which is needed to unlock the key to success on IWRM. Next, please.
1 minute left to wrap up.
Yes, and the real need, the I of IWRM is the key word of integration. Political will is needed at the highest level possible, and that should be matched with subnational governments, academia, civil society, and the private sector need to fully get behind the implementation of IWRM, as do international cooperation partners. And the message here, the take home, is that progress is 5% in the last 6%, sorry, in the last 3 years. At that rate, we will not reach the 2030 target of IWRM. And as the previous speaker mentioned, that will likely jeopardize the achievement of the broader SDGs. Next, please. So with that in mind, and this is my final slide, we will be launching today at this event the status report of IWRM in the Asia Pacific region 2021. Here on screen, you can see the URL and the QR code. And yes, we look forward to taking any questions you have on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you so much for introducing the status and also the progress of the IWRM after the Yangon Declaration and talking about priority action for IWRM implementation in Asia Pacific. I now thank you to all speakers of Section 1. Now I would like to move on to the Section 2. Section 2 is talking about the good practice of water governance project in Asia Pacific. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Yumiko Yasuda from GWP to moderate this section. So Yumiko Yasuda-san, thank you so much for coordinating this section.
Thank you very much, Yumiko Asayama-san. Good morning and good afternoon to good evening to everyone. I am the second Yumiko this morning that you will hear from us. So now we move on to the second part of the session. In the first session, you have heard the overview of what like the overall governance status that was been highlighted in different aspects from organization. Also very much cross-cutting, and really there's a lot of things that I think you have learned from listening to this. And now we dive into the second session. We dive into a concrete cases, and the purpose of this session is to really share the key lessons and innovative approaches on the water governance in the Asia Pacific to enhance the water security at the national and the subnational level. So these approaches could concern application of nature-based solutions, for example, in addressing water risk monitoring of water-related policies, the water policy instruments to manage trade-offs across water users, capacity building tools and data to enhance stakeholder engagement in water decision-making, or integrity and transparency practices, and examples to tackle institutional fragmentation and policy silos. Now you will hear examples from organizations in the region working, OECD, JICA, IUCN, and ICHAR in a form of mini video. After the video, we will welcome panelists from all the organizations to tell us more about the experiences. So now we start with the video. James, please play the video.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Oriana Romano, and I'm leading the OECD program on water governance and circular economy in cities. By 2050, over 800 million people will be at risk from impact of rising seas. Many water risks occur in cities. Asian cities in particular will be very much affected in the future. For example, Shanghai and Mumbai, which are important economic engines, and also amongst the largest cities in the world, are at risk of inundation. The OECD has been for long arguing that water is a vector for economic growth, social well-being, and ecosystem preservation. The blue economy has the potential of bringing innovative solutions to cities in relation to water. However, there are three main issues that have been hindering the localization of the blue economy. First, The traditional approach to the blue economy has been extensively applied at national and international level, even though the cities hold very important competencies over the blue economy, such as in sectors like tourism or fisheries, and these economic sectors are very important sources for local jobs. Second, the blue economy usually refers to marine environment, although recent definitions encompass all water bodies, and this highlights a new need for a functional city basin approach. Third, it is very important to apply a system approach to water decision making in response to climate change. So in the post-COVID-19, the blue economy presents a huge potential in terms of green recovery. But in order to do so, cities should be able to foster a blue economy that is resilient to shocks and risks, inclusive by providing opportunities for jobs, sustainable, preserving natural ecosystems, and circular to tackle pollutions and halve plastic litter. In a nutshell, cities should adopt a risk-proof approach, resilient, inclusive, sustainable, and circular.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I will explain how Japan is evolving water governance. I hope this will be useful for other countries. Japanese water governance arrangements have evolved to resolve issues caused by water resource projects. In the 1960s, water governance was improved at a project scale. Relocation caused by dam construction became issues. The government improved relocation measures. The affected people are involved in planning process of relocation programs, and supporting the affected people was strengthened. In the 1990s, improved at the river basins level. Civil society organizations were concerned over ecosystems damaged by dam projects and limited transparency. Information was open to the public and river basin committees were established. In 2010, improved at the policy level. Civil society organizations argued the efficiency of dams. CSOs and government started discussing evidence-based policies from the river basin perspective, based on science and engineering knowledge. I will explain the details of issues at each stage. Local communities opposed to the Shimoke Dam project and constructed a fort as a project site. The government violently resolved this problem. The police force clashed with the opposing residents and removed the fort and the residents by force. Civil society organizations opposed against the Weir project in Nagaragawa River because of concerns about damage to ecosystem and limited transparency. They conducted demonstrations and other protest activities. Civil society organizations questioned the efficiency of dams throughout the country. This photo is a controversial project of Yamba Dam. The government and civil society organizations discussed water resource management based on evidence of flood simulation and water demands prediction from the river basin perspectives. Japan has been evolving water governance through resolving these social issues, starting with involving affected people at a project scale, expanding to river basin scale and to policy scale. JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency, is producing the knowledge notes of evolving water resource management in Japan. We are happy to continuously share our knowledge with other countries.
Dear participants to the Stockholm World Water Week 2021, it's my pleasure to have the opportunity to provide a few key messages on behalf of IUCN and as part of the event Asia Focus, Accelerating Inclusive Water Governance to Advance Sustainable Development. IUCN is a membership union composed of both government and civil society organizations, and IUCN has been working on transboundary basin management for the past 3 decades in several parts of the world, including in Asia, with a focus on the Mekong and also the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna basins. This work has led to a number of key learnings. One of our approaches is, of course, to build on and to promote the principle of international water law, particularly on the global frameworks on water cooperation provided by the UNWC and the UNEC. These UN conventions provide a basis for dialogue building on principles such as equitable and reasonable uses and sharing of the benefits of shared basins, avoiding causing significant harm to other watercourse states, and the need to take into account vital human needs and the protection of the ecosystems on international watercourses. Dialogues based on UN conventions can progressively evolve toward ratification, such as when Vietnam ratified the UNWC in 2015 with IUCN support. However, the UN conventions also serve as a way to identify gaps and opportunities for improvement. A number of analyses carried out by IUCN and partners in the Mekong and the GBM basins identified that most of the existing water agreements have weaknesses. These agreements or treaties in Asia are sometimes only bilateral, often looking at the mainstream only, and some treaties only address the sharing of volumes of water, leaving little space for civil society engagement and lacking clear and mandatory procedures for conflict solving. Our work has highlighted the importance of adopting a basin-level approach to governance. We look beyond water management, ensuring robust governance mechanisms take into account issues related to forest management, agriculture, climate change, and energy, and ensure that the government agencies responsible for these themes are engaged with transboundary water governance frameworks. Another learning is the importance of informal cooperation. The governance of shared basin must look beyond solely government-to-government processes. It is important to ensure a holistic approach to governance involving all relevant actors and levels, particularly civil society. Where high-level official or diplomatic governance mechanisms are stuck, international organizations can support innovative dialogue that can unlock issues and then link back to official processes. An example is the creation of the Ganges-Brahmaputra-Meghna CSO network, a regional network of more than 30 CSOs working on river management and governance in the GBM basin, who joined forces to develop harmonized strategies and key messages to interact better with national governments. And finally, it's of course important to remind ourselves that governance is a tool, not an end, and it's important to support countries in understanding that cooperation doesn't only mean conflict solving. Our work focuses on evidencing the potential for benefit sharing and Nexus water, energy, food, and environment in shared river basins, and highlights the joint benefits that countries can gain by working together. This, we believe, is key to motivate countries to cooperate and establish robust cooperation mechanisms.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tetsuya Ikeda, Deputy Director for International Coordination of ICHAM. I'm much honored to have a presentation at this Asia Focus session of Stockholm World Water Week 2021. Established in March 2006 as a UNESCO Category 2 Center, ICHAM implements innovative research, effective capacity building, and efficient international networking on water-related disaster reduction. ICHAM serves as a secretariat of International Flood Initiative, IFI, a global joint initiative with UNESCO HP, WMO, UNDRR, and the other international professional organizations. I'd like to introduce the case of Sri Lanka. After the severe flood in 2017, ICHAM started to provide a prototype of flood forecasting system. Since then, together with all the governmental organizations responsible to flood management, ICHAM supports to establish the platform on water resilience and disaster under IFI. Under this scheme, we meet every year and target actions such as flood forecasting and climate change adaptation have been implemented. Also, ICHAM implements capacity development program of master and PhD degree courses, in which governmental engineers join from IFI partner organizations. After the graduation, ICHAM invites all the ex-trainees to the follow-up seminar, which has been organized almost every year in different countries, and continue our relationship. Even under the constraint of the travel due to COVID-19, both domestically and internationally, ICHAM tries communication through the webinars. We also had the participation of high-level decision makers from Indonesia and Philippines. Lastly, ICHAM is developing an e-learning training. The participants were required to view 10 lectures and take an online exam. 21 participants completed the courses and received the certificates. This e-learning aims at fostering facilitators who have a function to moderate a meeting and provide professional advice on site. As a conclusion, to achieve the better governance on water-related disaster risk reduction, providing the professional support for the governmental organization, and implementing the capacity development for better management of water-related disasters. This is the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this very interesting and diverse presentation from the 4 organizations. Now, I would like to invite a representative of the 4 organizations to discuss a little bit more about their lessons learned, challenges, and their perspectives on how to advance the good practices on water governance implementation towards achieving the SDG in 2030. I would like to introduce the distinguished panelists. Firstly, Dr. Oriana Romano. She's the head of the unit, Water Governance and Circular Economies, Cities, Urban Policies and Sustainable Development Division, Center for Entrepreneurship, SME, Regions and Cities and OECD. Second, we have Dr. Mikio Ishiwatari, the Senior Advisor on Disaster Management and Water Resources Management, Japan International Water Corporation Agency, JICA. Third, we have Vishwara Jam Shinha, the Program Officer and Natural Resources Group, International Union for Conservation for Nature Asia, IUCN Asia. Finally, we have Dr. Tetsuo Ikeda, the Deputy Director of International Coordination, the Director for Special Research in International Center for Water Hazard and Risk Management, ICHAM. So first, I would like to invite Dr. Oriana Romano. In OECD presented about the blue economy and the role of the cities. Please tell us what roles the key stakeholders should play to support blue cities to be more resilient.
Thank you very much, Yumiko-san. I'm very happy to join this discussion, and I will try to be brief and effective in responding to your very interesting question. So indeed, making blue cities resilient, inclusive, sustainable, and circular is everyone matter. So it's a shared responsibilities across levels of government and key stakeholders. Also, Principle 10 of the OECD Principles on Water Governance calls for promoting stakeholder engagement for informed and outcome-oriented contributions to water policy design and implementation. But there are 3 things that I would like to mention to take into account an effective engagement and so to increase inclusiveness. The first is that engagement needs to reach out beyond the usual stakeholders. Sometimes we are able to reach, governments are able to reach those that are usually participating in water decision making. However, if properly engaged, some stakeholders can be very key for providing information and also new sources of finance. So, for example, local knowledge and perspective from diverse stakeholders can help identify vulnerability and impact that may not be well known because of the high contextual nature of climate risk. And in some cases, indigenous people can help. When we talk about blue cities, property developers are another key stakeholders group. So, for example, for coastal adaptation, in fact, spatial development can generate long-term liabilities and so financial implication in terms of coastal flood management. So engaging these developers can bring new source of finance, but also different business models. The second point is that engagement process should ensure inclusiveness and accessibility. So it is important to avoid the consultation capture. And the third is that this process should be adjusted as need be. There are many ways to evaluate if stakeholder engagement is effective. Perception-based tools or indicators that can help to strengthen the accountability. And so this kind of checklist and indicators to measure and evaluate the progress can help customize the type and the level of engagement needed for different changing circumstances. Of course, the local authorities, the cities play an important role in promoting and facilitating stakeholder engagement, but as we always say, also through the OECD Principles on Water Governance, coordination across the levels of government is very important to build synergies and avoid overlaps.
Thank you, Dr. Oriana. Now I would like to turn to Dr. Mikio Ishiwatari from JICA. in case you're presented from Japan, what has been the way to ensure the inclusion and the key stakeholders into the decision-making process? And I appreciate if you could give a concise, short response to the question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for a very important question. I would explain more about difficulties, Japanese government governance arrangements. Yeah, of course, there are many good practices in Japan, but I believe some difficulties would be a good lesson for other countries. In Japanese cases, well, not all stakeholders can reach one conclusion quite often. Government agencies naturally insist on constructing dam, but environmental groups naturally continuously say against such dam project. This is a very complicated and difficult process and not reaching one solution. In reality, government organization can select members of river basin committees. This means the government can exclude some members if they don't want to involve them. So from such a Japanese experience, governance arrangement is not always beautiful stories. It's always complicated, and sometimes it's very challenging. Mitigating tensions among various stakeholders, reaching one consensus, these crucial issues are still challenging. Yeah, well, I could very brief response. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ishiwatari, for very concise answer. Now I would like to turn to Vishwa from IUCN. IUCN presentation has given us a great example of including the community voices of the Ganges-Brahmaputra basin and have touched upon importance of international agreement. You have also mentioned about the importance of international water law and particularly the global conventions. In your view, how can the global UN water conventions, and two conventions actually, support the inclusive governance of transboundary basins in Asia?
Thank you, Yumiko. I'm really glad to be here and listening to all the speakers today. I will try to explain it through a very quick slide here. And from one example of work that we are doing in the basin. So on the specific question of the law of international water law principles or the UN Water Courses Convention, here is a basin in front of you. It's the Meghna River Basin, which is shared by Bangladesh and India. And what you see here, the black dot is the international boundary, and this side is Bangladesh and this side is India. And you see India is like greener with most of the forests, so most of the water related ecosystem services coming from here. And downstream there is a bit of a cropland and it's more habited. But we see the problems of flooding these days due to increasing climate change in the basin. But unfortunately, to solve those problems which are happening here in the wetlands of Bangladesh, we need to act here in India and improve the management of forests. So the question here comes, is there a rule of the game to manage this basin, which is shared by two countries? We already hear from Colin that at the internationally, only 58 countries have reported on IWRM, and there are issues around financing and harmonization of laws. So within country, if these are problems, then what will happen at the transboundary level? And here the international water law provides you the guidance. If the two countries sharing the basin have signed the Inter-UN Water Courses Agreement, they abide by it. They abide by the principle of a stakeholder participation, joint monitoring, the need for impact assessment and exchange of data and information. So through signing UN Water Courses Convention, the two countries can agree to the rule of game, which leads in time to the harmonization of laws and policies. It leads to a better platform for dialogue between countries. So maybe in this example, it will help India and Bangladesh to negotiate if how India can manage the forest better. A nature-based solution strategy to improve the flooding situation in Bangladesh and what benefits India could get out of it. But to discuss all these things, you need the rule of the game. So here is one example where the rule of the games are not there. Things are happening, but by establishing the rule of the game, countries can move faster because there is a common set of principles they are working on. Yeah, that is what I would like to add.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this answer. Finally, I would like to ask Dr. Tetsuya Ikeda from ICHAM. You have given us some examples to enhance the capacity, especially in the Asian countries. And with regards to governance, what is the key achievement and what are you intending to do for the future?
Yumiko, how can I? Yeah.
Oh.
I was not able to share as well. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Yumiko-san. Thank you very much for providing this opportunity to give a brief additional comment. Yes, so ICHAM is working as a secretariat of the International Flood Initiative. This is a global initiative together with the UN agencies. And so through this scheme, so we are supporting to raise the capacity of the government and of the country in charge of the flood-related disaster, water-related disaster risk reduction by providing the expertise for the science and technologies. And also we help to enhance the capacity of the government and individuals through the training course. And so these training graduates are expected to be facilitators who can find and implement a good solution on the ground in each countries. So at this opportunity, so in this Stockholm World Water Week session, we hope so these practical achievements can be shared and disseminated to enhance the governance and so develop the collaboration partnership around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ikeda, and I'm so apologies, Dr. Vishwa, for cutting you off. I didn't quite realize. Would you like to just say some final words from your? Yeah, if you could unmute, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think nothing else, but I mean, this was just an example that I wanted to. I think I have explained it fully. One example where how a clear framework or a rule of law can help establish long-term policies and help them help the two countries harmonize their policies to better implement integrated water resource management and achievements of on the SDG 6 basically. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prisha. Thank you to all the 4 panelists and all the organization for this great discussion and presentation. I think I can say that we all learned that so many different dimensions are very important for this inclusive water governance to really improve, including from the stakeholder engagement to much better policies, use of science, and all of this. And now I would like to thank all the panelists for this session, and would like to move on to the part 3 to really take all of these situations that you have into consideration and what can we do next together. In this, I would like to invite Mr. Fani Vedahuditama, the regional coordinator of GWP Southeast Asia, to give a presentation. Fani, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yumiko-san. Hi, everyone. So thank you for attending this session. If you can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so after hearing many great initiatives from many organizations, my part here is to present a proposal as part of the ongoing water governance improvement initiative that will help to enable us to align as many as possible of all stakeholders' contribution in achieving water security. So our proposal here is called Integrated Water Security Open Program. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so if we are talking about Water Security Open Program, this is a crowdsourcing platform that allows action and ideas to be registered as a contributor to the achievement of water security goals in the basin, country, or regional level. Now, each registered action and idea will be linked to a set of water security indicators, and this way we can see who is doing what, where, and when. Most importantly, the open program will enable us to highlight not only government's action, but also multi-stakeholders' action that often not recognized or captured through the existing monitoring system. Now, the registration will be very easy. and will not require many information. So only name of the project, level of implementation, the location, duration, and then most importantly, of course, the link with the corresponding water security indicators. The target and the achievement, whenever possible, this also can be informed. Now, the registration process should be able to be done in less than 5 minutes and updated once a year. So, but also please note that this open program is not aimed to measure actions. Instead, it helps to show who is contributing to water security. It acts as a mapping platform with multiple benefits, of course. We also propose to all organizations here that attending this session to see this open program as a proposal for a collaborative action. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this slide actually emphasized my previous comments on the missing recognition of multi-stakeholders action, and the reasoning also why we want to establish this open program platform where we can map all the efforts on the ground and to facilitate a gradual strategic alignment between governments and multi-stakeholder actions in the near future. Next slide, please. Open program have several benefits. First, it helps to map ongoing efforts and identify which water security indicators are missing strategic action. Because we know some of the indicators of water security are obviously more popular compared to the other indicators. So here we can help to balance the effort. Secondly, the open program will also be able to help us to facilitate strategic alignment between the government's action and the multi-stakeholder action, and also facilitate specific targeted learning exchange between action. Now, on the third benefit is also this open program can help to recognize any contribution, no matter how big or small that contribution is. It helps also to provide the feeling that we are being a part of something bigger. So this is very important for all those organizations who is doing maybe at the village level or the small scale level. It should be recognized. And then fourthly, the open program can also help to facilitate resource mobilization and custom replication for successful action or strategic ideas. Now, to address problem on the ground. So can you go to the next slide, please? So this is how we are trying to visualize open program. So we do not want to work alone. And therefore, this open program must be directed by a steering committee that consists of key stakeholders. The open program will be set at the country and regional level. As for the water security indicators that we put here on the slide, the suggested indicators now have been developed by GWP and will be discussed with potential key partners who will later form the steering committee itself. The indicators are taken from the existing global indicators such as SDG, AUDO, and the result of the third UNDRR Conference Disaster Risk Reduction Conference. So we do not invent new indicators. We are using the global known indicator only. Please go to the next slide, please. The open program cannot stand alone, and it will be accompanied with 3 strategic activities. The first activities, I think this is very important, is the development of annual multi-stakeholder contribution report, where we can provide information who have contribute to which indicator in the country or the region regarding the achievement of water security. And then, of course, to facilitate the learning exchange events between the contributors, and then also to facilitate the alignment between the donor, government, and multi-stakeholder, because without this alignment mechanism, there is no alignment will take place. Could you go to the next slide, please?
You have 1 minute left to wrap up.
Thank you. So this is just an example. This slide, this next 4 slide, actually it will show you the prototype of the open program. So here you see the homepage of the open program platform, where you can browse, you can register your action and so on. And next slide, please. And then this is the sign up page for those organizations interested to join this open program. Next slide, please. And this is the page for registering your action. So you can see you can also put your action on the map, then we will see. And then the last slide, can you go to the next slide? Yeah. Once you are you registered your action, then it will appear there and everybody can see and even contact you for maybe for further collaboration. So I will stop here for the presentation, but I believe we have this survey. Can you go to the next slide, please? So do we have enough time for doing the survey?
Unfortunately, no. So
okay.
we would like to direct all participants to do the polling later after the session's end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then I will stop here. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, muted. So thank you so much for Fanny for introducing the Water Security Open Program. And audience, please kindly join, or your comment through, or Mentimeter indicated in our file on our passable box. I also ask all audience to ask any question and comment to panelist speaker of this session. Now I would like to wrap up. So James, could you, raise final slide? So I would like to, propose key priority action as a draft summary of this session. So first action is governance and monitoring of policies to enhance good water governance, mainstreaming integrity and transparency practice across water policy and institution to foster water security, including foster data collection and evaluation of level of implementation. And action 2 is finance and investment to ensure the current and future investment in water infrastructure are resilient to climate change and facilitate the alignment of nature-based solutions into existing and new green infrastructure to enhance water resilience, sustainability, and inclusiveness in Asia and the Pacific. Third action proposal is capacity building through collaboration platform and multi-stakeholder processes, such as Water Security Open Program and enhanced city-to-city learning, such as through circular economy. And third action, it's also partly as a promote adoption and application of international water law principle in the management of transboundary and shared river basin across Asia. And finally, train the experts in all government level and water-related institutions through the International Flood Initiative. So thank you all speakers to contributing this session and proposing these 3 key action plans. So now it's important to collaborate and partnership more to enhance water security and in Asia and the Pacific. Thank you so much for your cooperation and collaboration. And finally, I also thank you to all audience to listen to our session. So please come, or give us any feedback for improvement of our session and or projects. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next time.